We're live. Okay, thank you. Welcome to tonight's Planning Committee meeting at City Hall. We appreciate you coming along. I'll start just by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land of which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past, present and the future. Our panel members this evening, myself, Councillor Bruce Harwood, who's the Deputy Chair of the Planning Committee. We have Councillor Melissa Cadwell, who's attending her first Planning Committee. Councillor Peter Murray, Councillor Belinda Maloney, Councillor Ron Nelson and Councillor Jim Mason will be our panel this evening. We also have officers present. We have officers from our Planning Department, Joanne Van Slageren, John Rush and Hugh Griffiths, and I think we have Rory O'Loughlin and Clara Gartland online. I believe is Clara here. Oh, sorry, up the back. Thank you. Sorry, I actually can't see that far, but thank you. Okay. Our apologies are our other councillors who have other duties this evening. Are there any declarations of conflicts of interest to be noted? If any arise, please just let us know accordingly. Confirmation of the previous minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of November 2022. Can they be confirmed? Do we have members on this panel who attended that meeting and are able to confirm those minutes?
I haven't been able to find the minutes.
Check with our planning officer if we're not able to confirm those minutes. I'm not sure we even had two members who attended that particular meeting. All right, okay, thank you. Our procedure for hearing today is the officers will present a brief summary of the written report to the committee. The panel may ask questions of the officers. The panel may ask questions of the objectors. The objectors and submitters will detail their concerns to the committee. A 3-minute time limit applies to each speaker, so we'll be requesting that be adhered to, please. And the panel may ask questions of either objectors or submitters. And the applicant will detail their application and respond to any objector or submitter concerns to the committee. The applicant will have a 5 to 10 minute time bracket, and the panel may ask questions of the applicant. The panel will further discuss the application and make a decision this evening, which will be a decision of council. The decision of the committee is the final decision of the council acting under delegated authority. If anyone is aggrieved by the decision of the committee, they may appeal to the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal in Melbourne, commonly known as VCAT. Our staff can assist with this process during office hours. That's an alternative process that may be considered by some if deemed appropriate. Welcome. Our first item for consideration this evening is item PP 508-2021, which is 16 Duggan Court in Highton. I'll start with the officers' discussion. Thank you.
My name's Hugh. I'm delivering this on behalf of the Planning Assessing Office, who's actually got COVID at the moment, so they've given me a summary, so I'm just going to read to that.
Could you speak up a little bit, please, Hugh?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if you see me looking down on my sheet, I'm reading somebody else's submission because they're unwell. So just to start with, the application seeks a planning permit for buildings and works associated with the construction of 9 dwellings on a lot, the reduction of car parking requirements and to alter access to Barrable Road, which forms part of the principal road network. The 9 dwellings will consist of 7 2-bedroom dwellings and 2 3-bedroom dwellings. All dwellings will be provided with the car parking. The car parking reduction is seeking 1 visitor car parking space. With regards to the subject site and surrounding area, it's situated within a general residential zone Schedule 4 that reflects the locale of the Highton Shopping Centre increased housing diversity area. A special building overlay covers the majority of the site and surrounding area, including residential lots to the north and east of the site. To the land to the north, east and west of the subject site is all zoned general residential 4. Further north to the rear of the northernmost lots fronting Duggan Court is located in land zoned Neighbourhood Residential Schedule 8, and they're also subject to the Design and Development Overlay Schedule 14. Opposite the site on the southern side of Barrable Road is the Highton Reserve. It's zoned Public Park and Recreation Zone. Adjoining the reserve to the east is the Commercial 1 zone, which is the hub of the Highton Village Shopping Centre. At this moment, it's important to note that the site itself is located in an increasing housing diversity area, which the report itself goes into in great detail. With regards to the subject site, it's in an established area of Highton, opposite the Highton Reserve as previously stated. It's 70 metres northwest of the Highton Village Shopping Centre. It's developed with a single-storey dwelling constructed of a combination of face brick and tiled roof cladding. The site contains established landscaping with the front setback and side setbacks. It's relatively close to the shopping centres and services, and given its close proximity to the Highton Village, which is a neighbourhood centre under the City Grade Geelong retail centre hierarchy. Existing residential development with the immediate surroundings of the subject site can be generally characterised as medium-density dwellings displaying somewhat varied design details and architectural intent. Duggan Court generally contains single dwellings on individual lots, with some multi-dwelling developments. The built form character within Duggan Court generally incorporates single and double-storey built forms unified by pitched roof forms and external materials of face brickwork and tiled or metal roof cladding. Within Barrable Road, residential development consists of a mix of mainly single-storey dwellings within multi-unit developments of traditional design constructed to face brickwork or weatherboard cladding, once again with metal or tiled pitched roofs. Notably, there are some examples of contemporary residential developments in the surrounding increased housing diversity area. This includes an existing 9-dwelling multi-unit development at 4 Taylor Court, approximately 270 metres east of the subject site, an apartment development comprising 7 dwellings, number 54 Barrable Road, approximately 100 metres east of the subject site. So the proposed building itself, it contains a basement of 11 car parking spaces and 3 levels of apartments on top of that. The maximum building height is approximately 11 metres. The proposal includes balconies to each of the external elevation and incorporates a recessed 3rd floor level. The proposed building would be constructed of a combination of external brickwork, aluminium window and door frames, concrete columns and painted render. Detailed elements would incorporate perforated metal screening, clear glazing and metal louvers. And the proposed basement car park would be provided with a perforated metal roller door fronting Barrable Road. Vehicle access will be provided to the basement car park via proposed widened crossover from Barrable Road in the southeastern corner of the site. The main pedestrian access would be from Barrable Road to a lobby area, which contains a lift and stair core adjacent to the vehicle crossing fronting Barrable Road. With regards to referrals, the application was referred both internally and externally. No objection has been raised with regards to the alteration to Barrable Road by the Head of Transport of Victoria. No concerns have been raised by Council's special building overlay unit area, space engineering with regards to flooding. No concerns have been raised by Council's traffic engineers in relation to the reduction of the 1 visitor car parking space. Council's Parks Department have requested tree impact assessment and tree protection management plan, which are recommended by conditions on any permit granted. Council's Urban Design Department have raised a few concerns with the built form and interfaces between the public and private areas. However, as outlined in the assessment report, these matters are not considered to be fatal to the application when making a balanced planning assessment. With regards to public notification, as a result of that, 51 objections were received. The matters concerned can be summarised as garden area requirements, neighbourhood character concerns, amenity impacts, increased population density concerns, car parking and traffic concerns, impacts on stormwater infrastructure, car parking and noise impacts during construction, unsatisfactory ESD response and devaluation of property. These matters have been considered in assessment of the application. However, it is not considered that the proposal falls short of planning requirements in relation to the matters raised in these objections. The assessment itself has been assessed against planning policy framework, including the municipal planning strategy, the zone, the overlay, particular and general provisions of the Great Geelong Planning Scheme. In relation to the zone, as stated before, it's in the General Residential Zone Schedule 4, which specifically relates to urban increased housing diversity areas. The purpose of the zone includes to encourage development that respects the neighbourhood character of the area and to encourage a diversity of housing types and housing growth, particularly in locations offering good access to services and transport. As such, local planning policy applies which identifies the site as an increased housing diversity area. These areas have been identified as appropriate for increased housing diversity and density. Pages 32 and 34 of the agenda specifically reference a recent VCAT decision in relation to 4 Taylor Court in Highton. It's dated 10th of March 2021, which the tribunal directed council to issue a permit for the 9 dwellings. The VCAT member outlined with regards to that in relation to the the Highton Shopping Centre, saying the site is in an IHDA under local policy. These locations are around activity centres that have been identified with significant capacity to accommodate residential growth and increase housing diversity, and where maximising opportunities for housing is sought. State and regional policy supports the development of increased housing or dwelling numbers around existing activity centres to maximise the accessibility to jobs, services and facilities. Increasing diversity in housing is sought to offer choice and meet changing household needs. The purpose of the general residential zone includes encouraging a diversity of housing types and housing growth, particularly in location offering good access to services and transport. The site is well located for access to the services and facilities provided by the Highton Activity Centre. 9 dwellings will contribute to the number and diversity of houses in a location that is specifically targeted for this outcome under planning policy and encouraged by the purpose of the zone. So in this assessment, the application at 16 Duggan Court, it similarly considered that the provision of 9 dwellings will assist in delivering increased housing diversity and density in this area that is specifically targeted for this outcome under planning policy and encouraged by the purpose of the zone. In relation to character, we also need to consider whether the proposal respects the neighbourhood character, as this also is a purpose under the general residential zone, and the IDH policy includes the neighbourhood character objectives. A decision on this application needs to be made by balancing objectives to respect character and to provide additional housing at increased densities. This principle has been discussed in many VCAT decisions, and it's noted that coming out of those decisions, it has been outlined that planning does not need to seek a perfect or ideal outcome. However, it must achieve what is acceptable by balancing policy objectives. So some of those discussions are outlined in pages 43 and 45 of the agenda. Notably, the tribunal found that developments which is respectful of neighbourhood character does not imply that such development must be the same that already exists. Respecting character must embrace the need for change and diversity in the type of dwellings where encouraged by planning policy and the purpose of the zone. It is overly simplistic to say that increased housing densities should be rejected because the level of development is more intense than what exists on adjacent or nearby land. Proposals introducing built form which may not currently be present or which may not be prominent is not a basis for concluding that it fails to respect character. The desire to preserve neighbourhood character should not be given undue weight at the expense of policies that encourage the provision of additional housing. In this view, the assessment of the proposed development at 16 Duggan Court must be undertaken in the context of the policy framework and zone provisions, which encourage a variety of residential developments at a range of densities and to evolve the character of the increased housing diversity areas through a more inclusive or intensive development. More specifically, a departure from typical detached dwellings in this locality is sought by the purpose of the zone and the relevant policies. It is acknowledged the proposed development would be distinct from existing development of adjacent sites. The proposal has incorporated built form and design elements which responds to and respects neighbourhood character of the wider locality by including avoiding boundary construction and allowing for landscaping to side and rear boundary interfaces, a front setback that allows for a sense of space to the street in response to the built form presenting to this part of Balboa Road and Duggan Court, an open front boundary which is similar to nearby development with low or no front fencing, external facing materials incorporating brick, render, glazing and metal cladding which is representative of existing nearby development, site coverage which complies with the standards prescribed within the schedule to the zone, side and rear setbacks which comply with the standards prescribed within the schedule to the zone, and a recessed third floor level and open balconies which provide outlook and interaction to the public open space on the southern side of Balboa Road. The application complies with the mandated requirements of the zone to provide 35% of garden area, and it also does not exceed the maximum building height nor the maximum number of stories. The proposal would provide a 3-storey residential development which responds to the established built form characteristics and exhibits a built form character which responds to the purpose of the zone and relevant policies which anticipate the character of the locality is expected to evolve through intensive development. So in this regard, the neighbourhood character response is considered to accord with the zone and policy objectives within the Great Geelong Planning Scheme. In relation to car parking, the application has been supported by a car parking demand assessment by a qualified traffic engineer, and this details that there's sufficient car parking available in the road network to accommodate the shortfall of one visitor car parking space on the subject site associated with the proposed development. As stated before, all dwellings are provided with the car parking as required. This car parking report was reviewed by Council's traffic engineers, and they advise that they support the proposal to waive the one visitor car parking space. So in conclusion, the application has been considered against the relevant policy, the general residential zone, the special building overlay and relevant particular provisions. The application would provide increased housing diversity in an area anticipated to see infill medium density residential development. It is considered to result in an acceptable neighbourhood character response which contributes to the preferred character of the surrounding area, which is to evolve the character of this locality through more intensive development. Additionally, the application is against the objectives contained within Clause 55 and is considered to represent an appropriate design response to the relevant objectives contained within Clause 55. Therefore, it is recommended the Planning Committee determine to issue a notice of decision to grant a permit subject to the conditions contained in the report. Thank you.
Any questions of the officer? Jim.
Thank you. One question is, I understand from what you just said and from what I've read that there are 11 car parking spaces available for the residents, but and there's one car parking space slated as necessary, but that has not been allocated. Can you explain why that can't be accommodated, that one visitor car parking space?
Good question. As not being the assessing officer, it's pretty hard for me to answer on the spot for you. All I can say is that Clause 52.06 deals with car parking and it sets out a specific requirement for car parking. So if you have two bedroom dwellings, you need to provide one car parking space. 3 or more requires 2 car parking spaces. Then it also turns its mind to say that if you have 5 or more dwellings, you need to provide 1 visitor car parking space per 5 dwellings. So as Nina proposed, they need to provide 1 visitor space, which they're not providing on this occasion. With regards to why they haven't provided it, I'll give you an honest answer because I said I haven't read the traffic assessment report. All I can say is that they provided a traffic assessment report that's been submitted to Council's traffic engineers. They've looked at it and they're satisfied that the reduction of the 1 visitor car parking space is appropriate.
Also, Councillor Mason, you could refer that to the applicant when they're ready to speak, and the traffic report also did indicate there was enough capacity in the street to cope for the reduction of 1 visitor space.
Thank you.
Any other? We'll go to the objectors. Our first one we have on the list is Mr. Stephen Funston. Is Stephen with us this evening? Thank you. Come forward, please, and have a seat. And got a 3-minute timer, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, councillors. My name's Stephen Funston. I live in Hyden, a few minutes' drive from the block in question, and I'm a part owner of one of the units in upper part of Duggan Court. My personal objections to the proposal centre on 3 main issues. 1, destruction of character of the area. Multi-storey mega buildings look out of place in any residential area and are best suited, in my opinion, to the CBD. Proposed development looks like an office block, and an ugly one at that, and would be nothing but a blot on the landscape for this neighbourhood. 2, traffic congestion. The traffic report for the proposal states that the proposed development is expected to have a negligible impact on the surrounding road network when compared to the existing operation, even though it's admitted that they would expect up to 6 vehicle trips per dwelling per day from the 9 apartments. As local residents know, parking is already at capacity in Barrable Road and there are bottlenecks almost daily in this location, especially in peak hour. This will exacerbate over time by the ever-expanding volume of traffic coming from the Barrable Hills area. Traffic trying to enter the village regularly creates complete gridlock in the village, even sometimes at weekends. Another consequence of this traffic congestion in Barrable Road has already been seen daily, whereby vehicles are avoiding the North Valley Road Barrable Road roundabout by heading over to Mount Pleasant Road, then returning to Barrable Road via Montague or Elizabeth Street, both very narrow streets with an extremely high concentration of residents' vehicles parked overnight on both sides of the street. 3. Pedestrian safety. There appears to be very little recognition in the traffic report of the serious risk of danger from vehicles entering and exiting the apartments to pedestrians, many elderly and or school children, pedestrians who use Barrable Road to walk to the village and to Belmont High School. People coming from the north and west of the proposed development need to use the footpath on the north side of Barrable Road in order to make use of the traffic lights to cross into the village safely. I'm very disappointed to note that the requirement that Council stipulated to provide a clear view to exiting drivers of the footpath in both directions was answered by the following words, and I quote, my own emphasis, generally satisfied. On the west side of the adjacent lane, the adjacent lane provides for the required pedestrian sight line. On the east side, due to the proximity of the site boundary, the full site triangle is not able to be provided. In this circumstances, considering the low level of traffic, this is again quoting the response, in this circumstances, considering the low level of traffic generated and the low speed vehicles will be travelling, this slight non-compliance is considered acceptable. Additionally, the fence along the eastern property boundary is lowered at the property frontage.
Are there any questions of Mr. Funston? No? Thank you for presenting. Mr. William Marshall? Thank you.
Council, thank you, Planning. I welcome the opportunity just to reiterate what I've written. I won't go into as much detail because I think there are elements of what I'm going to say will be handled in detail by others, including the previous speaker who's done a great job. Again, my name is Bill Marshall. I live in Shubra Drive, which is a very short walk from Highton Village, and I use access to the Highton Village via Barrable Road quite a lot, and I have 3 main objections. The first one regards removal of all vegetation and allowance for replacement in a high-density development like this on site. I've been involved in many objections of developments around Highton where tree removal has been a big issue, and I'm a passionate believer in maintaining the green nature of Highton, and this doesn't seem to do that. It removes all vegetation and it's got a very scant replacement strategy. Second is extremely poor traffic controls, and the previous speaker really has done a great job of verbalising what I'm about as well. Access to the site is dangerous and unsafe. Access on Barrable Road is not really practical for that number of traffic trips, and the congestion of traffic twice a day minimum on Barrable Road is evidence of that. The third one is no allowance for overloaded infrastructure on the site in support of increased resident density. And I'm talking here about footpaths, pedestrian crossings, access to the areas between the development and the oval and the recreational facilities there at all. The whole process and project really doesn't talk about that access much at all. The fact that more people will need to get from one side to the other via the existing lights, and you can already see it. There are school children in school hours running across in between the traffic just purely because the traffic's stopped anyway, and so therefore there's no point going to the traffic lights, and kids and people are doing that all the way. So they're my three main objections. As I say, the detail of those objections is being handled quite well by others, but I wanted to be here to face you guys who make the decisions about the planning and you guys who develop the plans to directly understand that it impacts the people who live in Highton. Thank you.
Any questions from the panel? If not, thank you. Gian? Good evening.
3 minutes is quite short. Like the officer acknowledged that it's not a simple issue. I live at Schubert Drive, about 850 metres away from the review site, and I acknowledge that this is a site in an increased housing diversity area. But development should be done smart. The planning report almost reflects as if we're all here because we're against development, we're against density, we're against progress. That's not what we're saying. We are saying we have an issue with how it's done. So, if this permit is granted, the development will be a dominating feature of Barrable Street and the area surrounding the Highton Reserve. Moreover, the removal of trees and vegetation will have a significant impact on the green and garden character of the area, but more importantly, it'll contribute to an associated increase in suburban temperature, which would pose a real risk to my and my family's health and people living in the area and broader Greater Geelong. So, there's not enough time, but I'm going to just pick bits and pieces. In the main, and my written objection is available, it deals with neighbourhood character, it deals with environmental and sustainability issues and traffic. But as Bill said, the previous speakers dealt with that magnificently. I'm just going to focus on environment. The planning report focuses on particular provisions, and it dismissed the environmental concerns. But here's the thing. Environmental sustainability is fundamental to the Geelong planning scheme. It's a primary objective in the founding legislation. It's a primary objective in Clause 1. It's one of the main purposes since June 2022. The state has overhauled the planning scheme in terms of issues that state can deal with. And they inserted responding to climate change as a main factor in this planning scheme. There's no denying that it's an issue that must be addressed. It's also part of the municipal strategy from June 2022. The operational clause 71.2.3 elevates sustainability as an outcome, and clause 65 since July 2021 requires authorities to consider. So that's just the overview. I can go in far more detail. One last comment. Oh, and there's case law as well that says when you look at acceptable outcomes, that community net benefit is the core of an acceptable outcome. As a council, you are required in terms of local government legislation to take decisions in the best interest of the communities you serve, and very specifically, if I may quickly quote, to promote the economic, social and environmental sustainability of the municipal district, specifically including mitigation and planning for climate change risks. That's in Section 8 of the Local Government Act. That is your responsibility. I urge you, take steps, make decisions, respond to that responsibility. Thank you.
Any questions of Gianna at this stage? If not, no, thank you for your presentation. The time for the applicant, Marshall Sullivan. Thank you, Marshall.
No relation.
Duly noted.
A new one. We've been working on this with council for around 2 years. There's been a number of matters that we've had to take into account in that period of time, including a change to the zoning of the land, which resulted in the need for a substantial redesign. One of those resulted in garden area. That was a requirement that the state government introduced onto us without any form of consultation. We responded to that. That resulted in the need to provide for at least 35% of the site to be set aside for garden area. We've also been working very closely with council dealing with flooding issues. There's a special building overlay on the site, so we've responded to that and worked very closely with council's flooding team, and we've resolved that as well. We've worked closely with Barwon Water and resolved some issues with those with that agency as well. And we've also gone through 2 public notification processes as well. Some of that time was all through COVID as well, so that represented some interesting challenges for us. Notwithstanding that, we feel that we've come up with a design that is site responsive, both in terms of its character and how it responds to its context, but also what we say importantly, how it responds to the planning scheme and the aspirations that are set out in the policy framework. And we think that what we're delivering is something that is actually a really positive contribution for our current and future community. So with that in mind, in terms of the design, we're set back off all the boundaries. We don't have any walls on the boundaries. We've got a recessed upper level. We've got all of the car parking that we need for all of the residents. There was a question, Mr. Mason, just in terms of why can't we provide an additional car parking space for the visitors? Typically, visitors don't access basements anyway, because there's usually a swipe card system, but all of the residents do have the car parking, including bicycle parking and waste storage, and also just general storage options. And our survey work confirmed that there was some capacity, certainly within the road network, to cater for the loss of or the deficiency of that one space. We've worked very, very hard at sustainability. We've prepared a sustainability management plan through a consultant, which has formed part of the submission that has been addressed in council's draft conditions, which seek to implement that management plan, which we want to embrace. We want to deliver an outcome that is sustainable. We have tried to design this building to, again, as I said before, be responsive to its site, to the site in terms of how it passively overlooks the open space and how it can interact with the context. And as I said before, being set back off all the boundaries, we are on the south side, so there's no overshadowing issues, there's no overlooking issues, and there's no access and parking issues that directly have an impact to our neighbours. And in terms of the traffic assessment, we have a traffic engineering assessment that was prepared by a reputable firm that was tested by council's traffic engineers. It was tested by the Department of Transport. Even the Department of Transport, being a transport zone, a principal road network, they provided a one-page response with one condition. They did test it and they've deemed it to be acceptable, as did council's traffic engineers. In terms of the submissions, we acknowledge what people have said. We understand the concerns. We understand the notion of change and what that means for people and how it affects people. It's certainly not a reason, in our view, to not do anything. It's a matter of how we can try to respond to that. And as I indicated before, we feel that we've come up with a design that is site responsive and really avoids that material impact to our neighbours. As I said, in terms of our consultation process, we didn't have a face-to-face for a number of reasons, including the timeframes and the COVID process and so on. But we did respond in writing twice to council in relation to the concerns raised, and yeah, we feel that through the 2 public notification processes as well, and there was media attention. There's no confusion here of what's proposed. We've been very open and about our submissions and what we're intending to do on this site, hopefully with your endorsement. We have all of the referrals that both council's internal departments and all the external agencies have supported the proposal, all support the application as well. The council planning report is outstanding in our opinion. It's a roughly 100-page report. It's excellent. It's citing all of the right VCAT decisions. It's analysed the policy in detail. It's responded to all of the objections. We fully support the conclusions reached. We fully support all of the conditions that are suggested. I just want to talk briefly about policy, and I'd like to, again, with your permission, I can introduce James Morphy, who is the landowner. Could I just do a quick time check, please, Joanne? Okay, policy, very quickly. Increased housing diversity area. I'm not going to labour over that, but it does contemplate change. It contemplates change for the right reasons and in the right locations. 70 metres from the activity centre, close to public transport, opposite open space, responsive to its context. That's ticking a lot of boxes. I can go through that, and the officer's report has outlined that as well. It provides a choice of lifestyle for people that choose to live in apartment-style living. That comes with a lot of benefit in terms of safety and efficiency and being able to have access to common property and parking in a basement. We meet the garden area requirements as contemplated by the policy, and I'm going to stop there for a moment because I want James to talk for a moment. James?
Thank you, councillors and planning department. I grew up in Geelong, and Highton Shopping Centre has been actually my shopping centre for the last 15 years. And I love Highton as much as anyone loves Highton. I developed Miramar in the city. I had a lot to do with the customers that we had. We sold over 112 apartments. I had spoke to probably 1,000 different people about the concept. And it was a relatively new concept apartment living in Geelong back then. What they loved is people were wanting to downsize but not downgrade. They wanted to upgrade their lifestyle. They loved the access to services, they loved the position, they loved luxury. They especially loved the security and safety aspect of Miramar. The low maintenance, the shared facilities, the joining of a community of people with similar requirements. They liked big balconies, maintained gardens and views. And they all thanked me for allowing them to downsize and upgrade at the same time. The interesting thing was the people of Highton, they loved the concept, but they loved Highton more. So they wouldn't buy it, they wouldn't move. And so from that, I was looking for an appropriate block in Highton where I could possibly do something that would satisfy this demand for people. And 16 Duggan Court came up. I saw it was in a growth zone. I spoke to my architect who's done many projects for me, and we both thought it ticked every single box. Close to the Oval, as we said, 70 metres from the shopping centre. It was a magnificent position across the road from the park and the bowling club and the tennis club. Colin Watson of Watson Young, he came up with a fantastic design, and we went through a few different designs. We chose this one. He incorporated the bricks, the curves, the colours and the large outdoor spaces, offering this diverse way of living away from a townhouse style. And we think it'll be an absolute hit. We actually interviewed all of the local agents and they loved it. They were actually fighting over who could sell it for us because they thought it was just something that was really required in Highton. Look, I believe this is one piece of a puzzle of fixing the housing crisis. It gives an option for 8 families to free up their houses because generally people are downsizing in Geelong, and it will be a beautiful addition to the Highton area. I've had 3 inquiries, and it sort of gives a bit of a human face to the people. Can I have one lady who worked in Melbourne? She works there 3 days a week. She lives in Melbourne. She saw it from a Geelong Advertiser article, and she rang the architect and found me. And she explained that she wants to move down, look after her parents in Highton. She can go to Melbourne 3 days a week, and she's got access to the shops and everything. And she actually even named the apartment she wanted, which was level 2 west. I had another lady who called on behalf of her mother, and she said it'd be fantastic.
James, we've got the theme of where you're going with that.
Okay.
So we appreciate that. But just
All right. Well, look,
time is
thank you.
against us. If you'd like just to wrap up.
Look, thank you for that. I appreciate your time and interest, and I think it's an amazing, exciting opportunity. So, thank you.
Questions of James Murphy? No?
If I could ask, is it Marshall? I understand you said, or I understand there's 35% of the site will be devoted to garden space, open space, and I just wonder if you've put your mind to species list or species to be planted, and how many trees would be involved in that?
We haven't prepared our landscape plan yet. You may have seen that it's a requirement of the draft conditions that a landscape plan be prepared by a landscape architect. But what we have allowed for is deep soil plantings. The 35% areas have been clearly shown on the plans, and there's also opportunities for terrace plantings as well, with some planter boxes shown.
And while I've got the floor, another question about environmentally sustainable design. What are some of the key design points in your design as far as environmental sustainability?
Good question. I'm not going to defer to I think it's a 60-page assessment that we got undertaken, but there's a whole raft of different things, including water use and reuse. There's the glazing and the efficiency of how that is implemented into the design, and the thermal massing and the materials that are used for that. There's the electrical aspects in terms of the energy efficiency, what do you call it? Like washing machines and any of the solar, the solar hot water and the anything that runs on the electricity, that has to be efficient. The lighting, what else have we got? They're probably the main, I suppose, the key aspects. But if you let me, I can defer you back to the sustainability management plan, because it's, to be honest, I'm a town planner, and a lot of it is quite technical. There's Section J reports that are dealt with at the building stage, and we can go into that level of detail, but I'd have to refer to the expert report.
That presentation. I've just got a question with respect to the officer's report on page 33 indicates that there's some amenity concerns, which is including overlooking to the neighbouring properties, including 1 and 15 Duggan Court. Could you comment on that?
I don't feel there are amenity issues, but you'll note in the condition 1 of the draft conditions recommended by the officers, there is some additional suggestions there for screening to comply with the relevant provision of Res Code, and that is the standard that needs to be met regardless. So yeah, that would. If there's, for whatever reason, a deficiency, which we don't think there is, but if there is that requirement to make sure that we submit more information that clearly demonstrates that.
I guess also there's the overshadowing or overlooking. Would that be mitigated by the screening or planting or something to that effect? Or
Yeah, so overshadowing, overlooking. Obviously, in terms of the overshadowing, that's demonstrated through the overshadowing plans and the architectural drawings, so that's fine. But in terms of the overlooking, the same provisions. So there's the Res Code clearly sets that standard, which is maximum 25% transparency, 1.7 high screening above floor levels to prevent that direct line of sight. You can sort of see out but not down. Same as the window positionings and all those sorts of things. So there's a clear requirement. The requirements that apply for any sort of townhouse development or apartment development, we're complying with those requirements.
Thank you, Marshall, for the presentation. The objectors and the applicant this evening and the officers. So is there a recommendation that we'd like to put forward? Or?
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I've just got another question of council officers. I was just looking at the objector list just then, and now I've gone off it, so I can't see it. The bottom of the objector list, it says Barwon Water. Is that right? Or is that just an error?
Barwon Water Alliance.
What is Barwon Water
in the
Alliance?
report it says that the Barwon Water does not object, but then the bottom of the list of the objectors it says that there's, yeah.
They originally objected. This is one of the reasons that took us a while to work through that. So there's a pipe that runs along the eastern boundary, and there was an issue with the I think it's called the angle of repose or something, and the depth. And so we ended up negotiating that, and they've withdrawn their objection, subject to a condition.
Sorry. Member of the committee wish to make the recommendation? Councillor Nelson?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Look, I want to move a recommendation that we accept the officer's recommendation, the recommendation that's before the committee.
Seconded for that? Councillor Mason, thank you. Just like to hear from the thoughts.
Yeah, look, these are difficult for councillors. I've got to say I'm always uneasy about coming along to planning committees, and this is no different. And to Steve and Bill and Jan, we accept your objections are real, understand your views, but for me it's about balancing those with what I think we really have to base our decisions on, but I'm saying that from a personal point of view, and that's the planning policies. And I believe this is a development that is consistent with the planning policy, and the real purpose of this zone being 70 metres from a activity centre. I think this development meets the criteria. It encourages diversity, encourages the development, it identifies the growth, and it's all about location to me. So I believe it complies in every respect. That's what I base a lot of weight on. So I'm moving the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Mason?
Yes, I also hold similar views. I understand it's an increased housing diversity area. That's one of the fundamental principles of the way the area should be developed. It's in very close proximity to lots of services, so it therefore complies especially with economic and social sustainability. And I understand one of the arguments is people who want to downsize, and they also have this close access to services. I understand the sustainability arguments, but I believe and also understand that significant attempt has been made to redress any short-term damage with the landscaping plan. And I note that the Department of Transport and the other transport authorities have accepted the recommendations and the design in terms of any questions about safety, etc. So I'm happy with the overall proposal.
The councillors to speak. Councillor Nelson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly don't support this development. I do support increased housing diversity, and we've talked about that, but I just think 9 developments on this single block of land is just too many. I think the entrance on Barrowell Road is dangerous. I drive Barrowell Road every day. I'm a Highton resident myself, and there's a development down the road on Barrowell Road that is similar in nature that was not approved by these councillors, and that is dangerous too. I drove past there today and there was a truck double parked out the front, because that's what delivery drivers do, and it almost created an accident, and I see that every single day when I go past, because Barrowell Road is now a feeder road for the ring road, so it's a really busy road with B-doubles going down there constantly, so it's a dangerous road, and having an entrance with 54 car movements a day for this is just too many. I think increased diversity is needed, certainly in that area, but not for 9 dwellings. I just think that's too many. I think it fails to respond to neighbourhood character. It's a big box. There's not many big boxes. The only one is the one down the road I just described, which was not approved by these councillors. I think that, as Jan quite rightly said, we've got a responsibility to act for the best interests of our community, and this is my community. With all due respect to James, I think Miramar is a great development in the centre of town. I can see it from my place. It sticks out. It's 21 stories, and that's great. And that's great for the CBD, but I don't want something sticking out like that in Highton. I just don't. And with regard to real estate agents wanting to list it, that's what real estate agents do. The property down the road, which is a similar one to this one, the proposal, always has for lease signs on it. And that tells me that people don't like living there. So I can't support this proposal.
I'll just make some brief comments. With this particular style of development, while we're adjusting in the Geelong region to the urban sprawl and infill, this is sort of, I guess, part of the puzzle as councillors to try and find the balance and meeting the needs of the community and of those who are wishing to live in our area in the Geelong region now. And we've seen now our population growth through the region is one of the highest in Australia, and it is causing a number of issues. Primarily is where we place people and how people interact with the existing communities and new communities. And Highton is an old community, but it is undergoing significant change, as is the rest of Geelong. So I consider this particular development to be meeting the needs of the community. I understand the objections that have been raised this evening, and I understand the passion behind them. But I also understand that with the growth and with the accessibility that we need to keep creating in our region and in particularly around our hub areas, which is what we as a council have been promoting for some time, this meets our policy and also meets the state government codes, etc. So, and I guess if we don't continue to look at options like this, we continue with the urban sprawl. So I guess it's a balancing act of what we try and work towards for meeting the needs of the community, but balancing out what our overall result is. I think for me, it's about what the community are expecting us to do as a council. They're my comments. So if there's no other comments, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour? And those against? Sorry, my apologies. The recommendation is carried. Thank you. So, we'll continue the meeting. Our next item is Hills Road. Planning application PP 1550-2021. The address is 125 and 127 to 165 Hills Road, Corio. Excuse me for 1 minute. I just want to ask.
Know what page it's on?
You get on it. Bad habits. All right, thank you. To my notes. Notes here. Right. This item doesn't have any objections or objectors present this evening, so we'll be hearing from the applicant. Oh, sorry, my apologies. We'll hear from the council officers first. Sorry, John. Clara. I'll get there eventually.
Yep, it's working. So the application being heard before the Planning Committee tonight is PP 1550-2021, which is for a multi-lot industrial subdivision at 125 and 127 to 165 Hills Road in Corio. The proposal is for a 13-lot subdivision of the 14.9 hectare site, which would create lots ranging between 1.02 hectares and 1.12 hectares with an average lot size of 1.07 hectares. The proposal would include an extension of the existing Prosperity Drive, which would provide access to 8 of the lots, with the remaining 5 to be accessed from Hills Road. The site is located to the south of Hills Road and can be accessed from the northern court bowl of Prosperity Drive and abuts McManus Road, which is an unmade road and closed to vehicles. The site is located in an industrial area known as the Geelong Ring Road Employment District Precinct, the GREP. It is surrounded by industrial uses, including grain storage, manufacturing, recycling, and notably the Lara LPG terminal, which is licensed as a major hazard facility. The Lara LPG terminal is located approximately 170 metres north of the site and is also accessed from Hills Road. The site abuts a gas pipeline that runs along McManus Road. This site is within the Industrial 2 zone and covered by the Design and Development Overlay Schedule 18. 125 Hills Road is also covered by an environmental audit overlay. However, as no use is proposed with this application, no information was required to address this overlay. The purpose of the Industrial 2 zone is to support large-scale and intensive industrial uses, and these are uses that require significant setbacks from more sensitive uses. It does not encourage the land for less intensive industrial uses that can occur in areas with closer proximity to sensitive uses. There are very few areas available within Geelong and Victoria that are zoned Industrial 2. The Design and Development Overlay Schedule 18 identifies the land as being within the GREP. The purpose of the GREP is to attract industrial users and promote it for its excellent access to a range of transport options and zoning for all industrial purposes and having clear development guidelines. The GREP framework plans are included in the scheme under clause 1701-1L02. It nominates 3 precincts with different purposes and minimum lot sizes. The subject site is located within Precinct 1, which has a minimum lot size of 5 hectares. There is also Precinct 1A, which allows for 1 hectare lots, and Precinct 2, which allows for lots at a minimum size of 2,000 square metres. Application was referred to Barwon Water, Powercor and Downer, who have provided conditional consent. The application was referred to WorkSafe. They have previously advised the city not to support the application. They advise that subdivisions with lots of this size typically introduce a worker population, which would introduce an increased population density into the advisory area of the Viva Lara LPG terminal. This would introduce a risk to personal safety of workers at the site. This afternoon, they did provide an updated response that indicated that they may not advise against the application not being supported, subject to a series of conditions that they've requested would be included on any planning permit issued. We can discuss those later because I think the applicant probably wants to discuss them as well. The application was internally referred to our engineering department, who were not satisfied that the application demonstrated that it could manage storm water. The strategic team also did not support the application due to the significant conflicts with the purpose of the GREP and the framework plan. This is due to the proposed lot sizes of an average of 1.07 hectares in an area that is intended for 5 hectare lot sizes. Following public notice, one objection was received from Viva Energy. Viva Energy own and run the Lara LPG terminal and the gas pipeline that abuts the subject site. The objection raises concerns due to the proximity of the site to both the Lara LPG terminal, which is 170 metres from the site, and the gas pipeline that runs along McManus Road and is located approximately 3 metres from the site. The Lara LPG terminal is classified as a major hazard facility. The terminal stores and distributes high quantities of liquid petroleum gas products. The gas pipelines convey hazardous liquids through pipelines at a high pressure. The high risks associated with this site require strict management of potential risks to public safety. It is considered by council officers that the application significantly fails to comply with the purposes of the zone, overlay and applicable planning policy. I'd like to discuss some of these inconsistencies in detail. Firstly, looking at how the proposal does not recognise the strategic importance of maintaining 5 hectare lots. The subject site is located within the Industrial 2 zone, which identifies the land as suitable for high intensive industrial uses that are not able to occur in other industrial zones. Further, the site is located in Precinct 1, which further identifies it as suitable for 5 hectare lots to accommodate larger industrial uses. I note that industrial uses have not been proposed as part of this subdivision. However, it has been submitted that smaller lot sizes will generally attract lighter industrial uses. These are able to occur elsewhere throughout the GREP and within Greater Geelong. The proposed subdivision of the site would remove the potential for the site to be used for more intensive industrial uses, which are not able to operate without significant buffers from sensitive uses. The proposed lot sizes of an average of 1.07 hectares are considered to be inconsistent with economic development policy, industrial policy and the GREP framework plan. To discuss some of these strategies that the proposal directly conflicts with would be clause 1701-1S, diversified economy, which is to protect and strengthen existing planned employment areas and plan for new employment areas. The GREP is a planned employment area. It has been established and it is included within the planning scheme. In regards to local policy, diversified economy in Greater Geelong, it encourages a regional and national scale industrial businesses to locate in the southern part of the Geelong Ring Road Employment District. This would not encourage the type of larger scale national and regional industrial businesses to locate within the area, particularly if the planning policy is not followed. In regards to state planning policy for industrial land supply, this is to be achieved by providing adequate supply of industrial land in appropriate locations, including sufficient stocks of large sites for strategic investment. We should also preserve locally significant industrial land for industrial and employment generating uses, unless long-term demand for these uses can be demonstratively met elsewhere. In this instance, the subject site is a significant distance from other more sensitive uses, and this is not found commonly throughout the Shire, throughout the municipality or throughout the state. In regards to clause 1703-2S, sustainable industry, strategies to achieve this are to ensure that industrial activities requiring substantial threshold distances are located at the core of industrial areas. It's to encourage activities with minimal threshold distances to locate towards the perimeter of the industrial area, and to encourage manufacturing and storage industries that generate significant volumes of freight to locate close to air, rail and road freight terminals. Furthermore, with our local planning policy for sustainable industry in Greater Geelong, it is to direct industries that require substantial buffer distances from sensitive land uses to the core of the industrial 2 zone in the Greater Ring Road Employment Precinct. Again, I would mention that no uses have been proposed, but the smaller lot sizes do encourage less intensive uses. In regards to state planning policy to protect state significant industrial land, this is to ensure sufficient availability of strategically located land for major industrial development, particularly for industries and storage facilities that require significant threshold distances from sensitive or incompatible uses. The second point I'd like to discuss is the proximity to the major hazard facility. As has been submitted, the site is 170 metres from the Lara LPG terminal and 3 metres from the gas pipeline. These both present significant risk to human life. As has been submitted, small lot sizes will generally attract a higher worker population, and this in turn will increase the risk to life in the event of an incident from the major hazard facility. Risks from a major hazard facility include, but are not limited to, chemical spillage, leakage, explosion or fire. A higher population using the site nearby would increase the risks to human life associated with such incidents. Increasing the worker population may also impact the ongoing viability of the Lara LPG terminal. The major hazard facility must reduce the risk to the surrounding area as much as reasonably practicable, if not able to be eliminated. The proposal will introduce new uses within the threshold of the Lara LPG terminal that would create challenges to appropriately mitigate risk. The objective of the state planning policy, clause 13042S, major hazard facility, is to minimise potential for human and property exposure to risk from incidents that may occur at a major hazards facility, and to ensure the ongoing viability of an existing major hazard facility. Lastly, the application has not provided sufficient information to demonstrate that stormwater management can be achieved. In conclusion, the application before the Planning Committee has the officer recommendation for refusal due to the significant inconsistencies with the strategic planning of the site, the risks to life associated with a major hazard facility, and the failure of the application to demonstrate that it is able to satisfactorily meet the requirements of stormwater management. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the committee? Yep. Thanks, Peter.
I've got a few. So, when did the GREP start? When was that?
I believe it was 2010, but it was introduced into the planning scheme in 2018.
2018, and that's, and this particular site is for 5 hectare lot sizes.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
So I've got to get my head around this. So,
excuse me, Councillor, the GREP's been around for before 2018. I think the reference to 2018 is probably the last time DDO 18 was amended. That's why that 2018 date is in the planning scheme, but it's certainly been around more like, I would say more like 2010. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the actual GREP was, 2010.
It's a long time coming.
Yeah.
yeah, okay. Well, that might make a bit more sense then, because, and that was back then when it was introduced. This area was to be for 5 hectare lot sizes, correct?
Right, and that informed the design and development overlay that specified different areas for different different lots.
And it hasn't been sold? Has it changed hands since then? Don't know. Yeah, okay. But in any event, it's now been sold, and the idea was to have smaller sizes than the 5 hectares and less intensive use, you would think, because of the smaller sizes?
Yeah.
It's sort of more intensive use, but less intense in terms of less noxious, as some of the bigger other surrounding industries are there, like the fertiliser companies in the nearby vicinity. I just want to clarify that. Sorry about that.
And just in relation to the stormwater, there was one of the reasons given was stormwater, but given Barwon Water today gave it a tick, is that right?
Barwon Water have provided conditional consent, but our engineering department have assessed the application, and they deal with stormwater runoff to check whether.
Council's engineering department deal with stormwater, not Barwon Water.
Look, I'd just like you to explain a bit further, please. I think I understand that there's limited opportunities for larger sites, and that this is one site where there is that opportunity?
Absolutely, yeah. So it really is quite limited, not just in Geelong, within for this industrial 2 zoned land as well, but the larger lots, so there aren't as many within our municipality, but it would also be noted that it does have significant setbacks from sensitive uses, which is really positive for those higher intensive industrial. We have other industrial land that abuts, say, the rural living zone or farming zone and things, and they couldn't be used for the uses that could occur at this site.
Thank you.
Are we still selling, as in we, council, still selling this land out in the GREP itself, or have we sold all the land in the GREP?
I couldn't tell you. That's not something we look at, who owns it and who's selling it. That's something obviously another part of the organisation deals with.
Mm. And I heard there was concern about the major hazard facility that's close by, yet the area is in a bushfire-prone area. The GREP's in a bushfire-prone area. Was that, when that major hazard facility was taken into consideration, whether we approved that, what about the fact that it's in a bushfire-prone area?
The major hazard facility came before the bushfire-prone area. It's been there many, many years.
That does get considered. 2017. A lot of areas are in a bushfire-prone area, rather than a bushfire management overlay where there is a significant risk. So a lot of cleared areas, all of the farming zone, for example, whereas this site has been assessed against those facilities, but it's also really challenging to find a site for a major hazard facility as well that has these significant setbacks from sensitive uses. So I had a look today as well. It looks like it's potentially about 750 metres from the rural, and it meets the 1,000 metres from the general residential zone, but it is challenging to where they could be situated, and it would probably be almost impossible to situate that in an area that's not classified as bushfire prone, because it's usually just.
My last question, got to go to my, talked about the previous application, we talked about diversity and creating diversity in areas, and this certainly seems to want to try to do that. Yet, because it's listed in, I'll get this right, Area 1, is it Area 1, Zone 1? Precinct 1, that only allows for 5 hectare lots, which is 50,000 square metres. Yet Precinct 2 allows for 2,000 square metre lots. So a massive difference between Precinct 1 and Precinct 2. So it just sounds like we're creating winners and losers here.
Not exactly, because then it's not like they're chosen at random. We didn't look at the land and say, well, we'll make these ones 5 hectares and these ones 2,000 square metres. They're actually located differently. So if you look at the GREP, the ones in Precinct 2 are actually closer to residential uses. Precinct 1A is also closer to residential uses, but it's further away from the LPG terminal. So there is actually a strategic reason behind why one is 5 hectares and one's 2,000 square metres. Having a look in the area, it does look like there's quite a lot of land available for future subdivision and available now within the Precinct 2 and Precinct 1A.
Is there a map of the GREP in this report? What page is it on?
There is an image, but it might not be as clear as it could have been. Just, yeah.
How far is it from there to there? A to Precinct 2.
That
There's an image on page 122 if councillors would like to refer to that. And I guess just in addition to what's been said...
It is blurry, you're right.
Just in answer to your question there, councillor, also, council has received a number of inquiries over time about these lots being smaller, which we understand because the pressures to try and get good available industrial land. Since we've had the GREP introduced, council has never supported a reduction to this size of industrial land. We have either refused those applications or those applications have not been made before, so this has never occurred to reduce it.
Just on that, so does that mean Precinct 2 is not industrial land? It's, what is it, commercial, is it?
Industrial 2 is more for your noxious industry. So when you go along Heels Road, of course, you'll see your big developers. So, of course, you've got Impact Fertilisers, requires big buffers. You've also got Hanlon Industries along there, requires huge buffers, and Civil Mart Constructions, which is just huge there. They want to make sure that they've got enough space for what they need to do without the interruption of smaller intensive industries that can interfere that. So they need that space.
Another one. One of the reasons for refusal is the close to the major hazard facilities. Now, what difference would it make whether it's a 5 hectare lot size or the smaller ones? It's still next to Viva.
I understand your point because, of course, I questioned the same thing when I first saw it. But as WorkSafe have provided with their response, generally smaller lots attract a bigger worker population, well, a small worker population. So if you have 13 lots compared to, say, for example, this subject site is 14.9 hectares. If we allowed a slight variation and allowed 3 lots, then you would have 3 lots. Otherwise, you have 13 lots, and that's 13 separate businesses that are all operating at an increased population, and that increased the risk in the event of a major incident. If you need to evacuate that area, it's actually going to take a lot longer and it's a lot less safe, and there'll be a lot more people to evacuate the area. So it actually increases the risk to human life if they were 5-hectare lots.
Well, my argument to that, or it's not an argument, but I'm thinking, well, a 5-hectare lot size, you're going to put a bigger facility on there, and I guess in a bigger facility, the bigger the machinery. So,
Perspective of the protection of human life, then yeah, it's maybe not about the machinery as much as people actually evacuating the site. But yeah, it is. I mean, it wasn't that I've come up with that.
No, I understand the
reasoning.
point you
It
make.
was included
Yeah.
from WorkSafe as well, who do have from their major hazard unit, so they deal with these sorts of applications constantly and understand the risks and how.
Sorry. Just on Councillor Murray, his point, but WorkSafe have withdrew their objection subject to these conditions, though.
So WorkSafe never objected. They advised against issuing a planning permit. This afternoon at 4:56, they did provide an updated response, and they've included conditions that would satisfy their concerns. But if you read through some of those conditions, which is why we still, apart from the additional issues with it not meeting economic development and industrial policy, they do create concerns with how to enforce these conditions and whether it is suitable, given the fact that it is subject to these extensive conditions that would be required to be placed on the site, that would be required to be managed by the city as well to enforce them. That if the application was to be supported, those conditions would be considered a step in the right direction, particularly in relation to human safety, but they don't resolve the concerns.
No further questions or comments. I'll go to the applicant to present. Thank you.
Just quickly, do you have a copy of the WorkSafe withdrawal? Would you like a copy of that that's just come through at, as Clara said, at 4:56, councillors? Because naturally none of us received a copy until half an hour before the meeting. If you'd like us to circulate that to you, we can do that, because they do include a number of erroneous requirements on there. It might be worth having a look at if you wish.
Well, yeah, that would be appreciated. We have heard some responses around it, so which is helpful.
Email's fine.
Sorry?
My email? Email's fine.
Get that out.
If you want to just email us at Save a Tree.
Can we email it? And the fact that it's coming this late, kind of, you know, if it was that urgent, it would have been here a lot earlier, in all honesty. Thank you. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Councillor Harwood. Look, I think what's already been gone through by the officers, clearly we respectfully disagree with the position that they've been formed. The crux of the matter in our view is that it comes down to the interpretation of the relevancy of the 2010 GREP, the framework plan that applies here. And then second of all, the position of WorkSafe and Viva in terms of the safety implications. We're very comfortable that we've worked through with the officers in terms of compliance with the balance of the requirements of the design and the development overlay, whether they be landscaping, built form setbacks and the like. We're very comfortable that we've ticked those boxes, and respectfully, we believe the council officers are of the same view. It comes down to the lot size and it comes down to the safety implications with WorkSafe and Viva. We've been working very hard behind the scenes, clearly with WorkSafe and Viva, to try to get them to remove their objection. We appreciate that it was very much at the 11th hour that it came through, and it was literally 5 o'clock today that we got the updated response from WorkSafe, and we're very pleased that they have withdrawn their concerns subject to the relevant conditions that they've outlined. Now, look, I'd just like to counter the position of the council officers in terms of the onerous or lack of onerous conditions that they put in. There's two conditions. There's two conditions that they've asked for. The first condition is A through to D. Number two is A through to C. That's not complicated to deal with as conditions on permit. Some conditions on permits might have 50 permit conditions. So respectfully, I'd submit that the conditions that they put down are very comfortably addressed in permit conditions. An example of some of the conditions that they've articulated is non-retail land users. They've asked for things such as gymnasiums to be avoided. They've asked for things such as a safety and emergency management plan. They're all very commonplace. If we were to introduce a new land use, for example, we'd have to apply for a planning permit for it. So that's not something that is even of a concern with the existing planning permit, because we'd have to get a separate planning permit in that instance. The emergency management plan, that would be standard practice in an industrial area to have something such as that as a permit condition. So we're very comfortable with all of their requirements in terms of their latest referral response. We're very comfortable in that regard. In terms of the latest position of Viva, we've been dealing with Dale Cooper at Viva in that regard. The position of Dale Cooper, and this is just verbal, so we fully appreciate that they haven't put it in writing back, but the position that they've articulated to us is that subject to WorkSafe being comfortable, they're comfortable. Now look, I fully appreciate, as I said, that we don't have anything in writing out of them yet, because this letter just came through at 5 o'clock from WorkSafe. We immediately got on the phone to Dale, we've emailed that response through to Dale, and we're very much hopeful that soon enough council will be able to get a written position confirming that from Dale. But everything that they've explained to us is subject to WorkSafe being happy, which they are now happy, subject to these conditions, that Viva will also be comfortable. I'd just now like to take you to the 2010 document, which is the GREP framework plan. What is really important, and I do acknowledge what Mr Rush said in terms of council's position, that they haven't yet varied anything that's been shown in terms of lot sizes. It is not mandatory. It is not articulated in the planning controls as a mandatory requirement in terms of lot size. There is discretion for council officers in terms of whether it be the application of the 5 hectares, the 1 hectare in the precinct 1, 1A or precinct 2. So it is discretionary. I appreciate that they haven't varied it to date, but it is discretionary. In 2010, the market conditions would be extremely different to what they are now. It's over a decade ago. What I think is really important to note is that in Precinct 1, in terms of the area which is the northern end of the GREP, where the larger lot sizes are encouraged, being the 5 hectare lots, if you look at an aerial plan, you would look at it and see that the vast majority of that area is vacant. The area of the GREP that has been developed is the southern end, the smaller lot sizes. What is that telling us? That's telling us that there is clearly a minimal demand in terms of those larger lots at the northern end of the GREP. There's also an economic reality to it as well from a price point perspective. Is there companies out there that have been able to afford these 5 hectares? I'm a town planner, I can't tell you that exactly, but if you look at the economic evidence that was supplied to council as part of this application, it suggests that there is not. It suggests that there is a critical demand for smaller lot sizes, and that has been, the proof is in the pudding in terms of what has been developed at the southern end of the GREP as opposed to the north. This also wouldn't be an illogical transition in those lot sizes. So whilst we are within an area, the Precinct 1, which is south of Heels Road, The majority of Precinct 1 is north of Heels Road, which is shown in the framework plan, which I'm sure you've all got a copy of. So it is not an unreasonable expectation, nor an illogical planning outcome to have the smaller lot sizes south of Heels Road with the larger lot sizes transitioning to the north all the way to the northern end of the GREP. A couple of other things that I just wanted to reiterate, and I appreciate Councillor Murray here has put the question back to the officers, is that smaller lots does not translate to less obnoxious uses, nor does it translate to less people being on the site. There is absolutely no evidence in the WorkSafe submission, the original WorkSafe submission, nor the officers' reports to suggest that smaller lots are going to result in more people within the site. As Mr. Murray, Councillor Murray here said, even if there is a large 5-hectare subdivision with a large industrial land use on there, that could generate more people. And I'm not saying that it could or it couldn't, but there is absolutely no evidence in front of you to suggest that smaller lot sizes are going to result in more people being in that area than a larger lot size. Notwithstanding that, WorkSafe has pleasingly withdrawn their objection subject to those conditions. So our belief is that that issue is off the table at least. If we were to treat some of these safety issues as well in terms of the hazard material, the hazard facility to the northwest of the site, that's effectively that was all known at the time that this GREP was planned for as well. The high pressure gas main that runs out McManus Road as well transverses further to the north as well. Is that suggesting that we're quarantining the entire area? We've made substantial efforts in terms of the subdivision design with additional setbacks. We've put design implications on the table to remove direct access out onto Heels Road if needs be, so we can get the vast majority of these lots accessed internalised via our court bowl to avoid any additional vehicles onto Heels Road if there is going to be concerns in that regard. All of these matters are ones that we've put on the table and can be conditioned appropriately if and when required. The last thing that I just wanted to mention is that our client hasn't shone away from engaging with WorkSafe and Viva, so we appreciated their responses in the first instance, but we've done an extreme amount of detailed effort to work with them in the background to try to alleviate them. And their latest response, albeit at 5 o'clock, just to reiterate, we're very comfortable with the conditions that they've posed. Just 2 conditions that they put there. We don't believe in any way, shape or form they're too onerous or too difficult to implement via permit conditions. It's very, very commonplace for things such as caveats, restrictions or whatever it might be to place on titles to deal with some of these issues, and we don't think that it's obscure enough to cause any type of challenges with a typical suite of permit conditions. So to wrap up, we are asking for flexibility in the interpretation of the 2010 GREP framework plan. The industry and the market conditions have made it extremely evident that what was planned for in 2010 has not been delivered on the ground, nor is there a demand for it. There will still be, even with the delivery of our site, we've calculated that there will still be 176 hectares of available land to the north of us for 5 hectare plus lots. That's 35 allotments that would be available for 5 hectares. 176 hectares. So any proposition in terms of the lack of availability of land in terms of those larger lot sizes, we would put to you that there is 176 hectares of available land for those larger 5 hectares within the GREP. Thanks very much and happy to take your questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? While I think Jim's thinking. In relation to the potential of what you're deciding to do with this particular acreage, do you believe, and this, you may not be able to answer this, but do you think the demand is there immediately to occupy?
Yes, 100%. So based upon the advice that we've received both from our economic consultant that provided the report to council, in addition to the work that our clients have done in terms of testing the market, completely. So it's a price point perspective. So it's a twofold. The actual businesses themselves that require that 1 hectare lots, it's also a price point and an affordability perspective. If there were businesses that could afford and require 5 hectares, we would have seen a greater take-up, but there just simply hasn't.
Thank you. Jim?
If I could ask, look, I'd just like you to confirm a bit. I might go back to the officers as well, because we seem to have some mixed information here, conflicting information. And one is that it's discretionary or not. And the other is that we have, you've already stated that there's 35 times 5 hectares available elsewhere. So in accordance with my earlier question, it seems difficult to understand that this is, we have limited opportunities for these 5 hectare lots.
Thanks, Councillor Mason. Just to answer your first question, I might defer to the office in terms of the discretionary. That's our interpretation of the policy.
No, absolutely. So there's no difference there. It is a discretionary hectares. However, in this instance, we would consider it to be inappropriate given the strength of the planning policy against this, which is what we take into consideration, and maybe some variations that we would consider might be more minor. It also allows us, for example, if there was something like an electrical substation, which was proposed in one of those, that doesn't need 5 hectares to operate, and maybe something like that we would support underneath that 5 hectare minimum lot size.
Your permission.
Just in regard to that, the word discretionary is not used in the planning scheme. It doesn't say under the DDO that it's discretionary. It just doesn't have the word must. It's very clear that it has the word 5 hectares for precinct 1. It just doesn't have the word must.
Councillor Mason, just in terms, oh sorry, I could respond to your second question if you wanted.
Please, let's. I want to hear both. I want to get to the nitty-gritty of this.
No worries. So I can completely concur with what the officer said there. If it was to be mandatory, then the policy would have said must, and it doesn't. So there are plenty of policies that are mandatory and they use the words must. So if there was an intention in 2010 and subsequently in 2018, when the DDO was most recently revised, if there was an intention for this control to be a mandatory requirement, then it is very easy for both Council and the State Department of Planning to put the word must in front of it, and they have not. So clearly the purpose of this control is to ensure that there is flexibility in its interpretation, because it's very easy and very common for the word must to be used when it needs to be mandatory. In terms of your second question, Councillor Mason, the availability of land, yes, that was our calculation, that there's 176 hectares of available land for those 5 hectare lots, even having regard to this land being developed for these smaller lots. That was put back in writing back to Council in terms of our RFI response, so they've had that information for some time. I'm not sure whether they've had the chance to counter that or to consider that, but that was our calculations, and I do fully appreciate that these industrial precincts are limited, and the work that the state government has done in terms of that industrial land supply has proven that there is a significant shortfall of industrial land. It doesn't differentiate between the larger or the smaller blocks, but we would say if there was a demand for those larger lots, then why haven't it been taken up?
So if I might, through you, Mr Chair, could I hear the counter-argument, please?
So while it may sound like a lot, industrial 2-zone land is quite rare, and it's not just rare when we consider it within Geelong, within the entire state. The location in the GREP has amazing access to transport that other locations don't, and that has state strategic importance to provide for these uses which have larger storage and larger setbacks required. I know it has been referred to as the GREP being from 2010, but just to clarify, obviously it was considered in 2018 when the DDO 18 was last updated, but the city has also conducted an industrial land supply report in 2018 where this was considered, and in it I'll quote from them, it said, "To a large extent, industrial areas are substitutable to each other, particularly the industrial precincts in Geelong, except for the GREP, which is strategically planned for larger industrial sites." So this was reconsidered in 2018 and it was enforced that it is significantly important. The quantity was considered at that time. The purpose of the GREP is to attract national and regional importance large industrial uses, and potentially that does take some time, but if we approve this subdivision, it does remove it from those potential uses into the future. And we would submit that there is other land available that can be used for these purposes.
Thank you. There's no further questions at this point. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Harwood, I was just briefly going to say it, and I do concur with what's said. It's been available for 13 years. 13 years that it's been available. So how long do we have to continue to wait to suggest that there is a demand and necessity for those larger lots?
Points are noted. Is nothing further? No further comments or questions for the applicant? Thank you. To make a recommendation, Councillor Mason.
I'd like to make a recommendation to endorse the officer's refusal. I think this is a very difficult subject, but I want to think about the future possibilities. The fact that it is such a strategic area, just having heard that it is of state significance, this strategic area, and also to the transport. So, in essence, I think that the safety issues have been discounted.
Sorry, Councillor Mason. My apologies. I should have got a seconder for that.
I apologise.
No, it was my error. So, is there a seconder for Councillor Mason's recommendation? Right. You'll second the recommendation. Thank you. Continue. Thanks, Jim.
I won't go through it all again. I'm sorry for that disruption, for my disruption
My
there.
apologies.
But I understand that the safety issues have been well and truly discounted, and that we've got this late information also from WorkSafe, and that I understand that that verbal recognition has been given by Viva as well, where Viva originally objected to this. All in all, I think that the main reason for my motion for refusal is the strategic importance of this land.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Councillor Cadwell. Sorry, you need to speak into the microphone so everyone can hear you. Thank you.
I concur with Councillor Mason's comments.
Thank you. Any other councillors to make comment? Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's an interesting one, and I'm the councillor that called this in because it's not as clear-cut as it's made out to be. I think there's some real merit in the diversity. We talked about diversity in the previous application, and I think diversity is warranted in this instance because, back to my point about land, if the land was needed, it would have been sold and developed already, but it's been there for longer than I've been a councillor and it's still not sold. And there's a lot of vacant land out there. So I think we need to encourage business. We need to encourage jobs. And I don't think we are in this instance. I think if WorkSafe were against it, they would have lodged their objection. Not only have they not lodged an objection, they've lodged a recommendation that says that they approve of the site and the development subject to these conditions. I don't have gyms there, don't have food and drink, and that's pretty obvious. You don't want a little truck stop there. That's fine. It's close to the ring road. It's close to McDonald's and Red Rooster and whatever else is out there. A Porto, I think it is. So I'd have to disagree with the officers on this one, and I think it's a good use of diversity, and I think that's what we need, and more jobs, and I think that's good for Geelong. Thanks.
The councillors, no comment? Comments and wanting to be, I guess, consistent in how I'm viewing the planning applications that have come before us. I see this as, again, an opportunity for the region and for the city. I'm not convinced our strategy is working in the GREP for actually moving property out there. This has been a long, long journey, and I've been on council a long time, watching the start of the GREP, watching the development of the GREP, and watching this subsequent sale of property out in the GREP. And it has been a very long, drawn-out process. I agree with the potential of developing the particular site in question, and as has been answered, and I haven't heard anything to contradict this, that the take-up would be relatively swift in relation to creating economic stimulus in the GREP, which is what the GREP is actually designed to do. It's its whole premise is actually to create economic stimulation through the region. Yes, we have the proper planning constraints in place, but in this particular case, they seem to have been mitigated by the work done by the applicant in relation to setting up a precinct that's going to meet the demands, it's within buffer zones, and is creating that stimulus, as I've touched on. I would expect Viva Energy to object from the get-go. That would be a given, I think, for an organisation like that. But those original objections appear to have been mitigated as well, to a point where they no longer actually object as such. And also with WorkSafe coming to with their comments or their decision at the final hour. For me, it is about developing opportunity, economic opportunity. And to me, the GREP, as I say, is designed to do that. And to me, this creates that opportunity. And it's not to the detriment of other potential 5-hectare lots out there. And we'll also be looking in the very short term, to potential further industrial sites, whether it's down in the south. So our capacity to meet varying market demands is one of our strengths. If we do not be flexible, I think that'll be to our detriment. Thank you. Any other comments? The recommendation. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
I think with respect to the conversation about the amount of individuals on site, that was, I guess it's confusing for all, because if you have a bigger site, there's the likelihood that you can have more people operating more manufacturing equipment and things like that. So I think that what's become abundantly clear is that we are not in control of how many people are on the site, and that potentially it could be, there could be a whole bunch of health risks, and that alarms me. I guess that's the nature of some businesses, and perhaps we might need to be clearer about how we mitigate those risks so that people can develop more quickly in the future with clearly stated parameters as to what's in and what's out, I guess, so that people know what they're doing when they want to purchase or subdivide and the like. So perhaps that's a note for us to maybe advocate as to what we want to see, and make it clear so that people don't have to delay for a significant period of time. Thanks.
Questions? If not, I'll go to the vote for the recommendation, which is to refuse the permit. So those in favour? Those against? The recommendation is lost. Do we have an alternative recommendation?
I do, but I put my glasses away. Just a sec.
Second, if
Sorry,
Councillor,
it will need to be amended because of the WorkSafe conditions. So Rory will
when
speak
that was
to
drafted, we weren't aware of the WorkSafe conditions. So if you're of a mind to grant a permit, and it looks like you are, you will need to add a condition that reflects WorkSafe's conditional consent. I think that's an appropriate thing to do. So I've got some words that I quickly drafted up the back before. It's in my handwriting, but you'd add that in. I can read it out to the particularly applicant, and it says, prior to the issue...
Sorry, Roy. Thank you. We will get to that.
Okay.
We're going to need that. Councillor Maloney has a question,
Sure.
but thank you.
Just had a question with respect to the last-minute nature of the two documents that are quite crucial in this decision, namely the one from, or the assumed document from Dale Cooper and the recent WorkSafe, which we haven't really had time to chew over. Is it possible for us to defer at all at this stage so that we can get all that information a bit more clearer before we go jumping the gate there? Or what's the thought on that? Is that possible? Sorry, John.
It is open to council to defer the matter, but entirely that's up to yourself.
So would we be deferring the matter for the purpose of being comfortable with the WorkSafe comments? And that's the only reason we would be deferring?
I await also the Viva if they are to withdraw their objection, because that's a bit unclear at this time.
Right.
It does mean that you would come back, doesn't mean that it will always be the same people on council, and therefore it would be heard by the planning committee at the time. So it's just one of those moving parts. Look, the application was submitted in December 2021. It's been 15 months and we've received WorkSafe comments today. Puts a lot of implication on yourself as planning committee. We understand that, but ultimately respect that the decision that you make, and that's just making it all clear.
So are we able to receive, or examine the WorkSafe information further and get confirmation from Viva and then convene and then potentially make a decision?
You can, yes. It would be a matter of...
Reinforce some of the discussion that we're having.
It would be a matter of when we could reconvene the exact panel and go through just that part of it.
I would respectfully suggest we could reconvene as quickly as possible if we were able to get that information as quickly as possible.
The Viva information's out of our hands in terms of we're not sure.
Yeah. Anything to help this keep moving?
Yeah, no worries. No, look, we'd clearly from our perspective, we'd appreciate a decision being made on the night if possible. We appreciate the complexity of that. In terms of Viva's response, we obviously can't guarantee it, but we'd be hopeful that it would be tomorrow, we would hope, given that we've reached out to them this evening immediately after the correspondence came through from WorkSafe. Is a suggestion potentially to hear from Mr. O'Loughlin the suggested draft conditions to be included on the alternative recommendation, and if they are comfortable enough, if there is comfort amongst the councillor cohort, that may be sufficient to make the decision tonight. Is it possible to hear those suggested additional conditions?
What I'm going to suggest is we do defer pending what language we do put into an alternate, and also pending our reading of the WorkSafe material and pending a response from Viva. So, sorry, yes, Melissa?
Officers, just a technical question about meeting procedure. Is there the capacity to defer this and to send it back to a meeting, a special or an extraordinary meeting, or whatever we want to call it, of this particular committee, so that the whole matter doesn't need to be heard again by new people, because that seems like a waste of everyone's time?
Yeah, can do that. You can move and second a deferral tonight for those reasons, and then we can try and arrange a meeting when you're all available with this committee to determine coming back with that information.
Mr. Nelson?
My question is, we've already voted on this and we've already declined the recommendation. We've already voted against the recommendation.
We don't have a position of council at this stage. So you've voted for refusal. You voted against the refusal.
We haven't presented an alternative as yet.
Yeah, but we don't have an alternate, so it's still outstanding until such time as you move another recommendation.
Right, good. Just wanted to get clarification.
So if we're comfortable with that and we're comfortable with the information we are to receive pending our final decision, what the alternate may look like.
If someone move and second a deferral, that's what...
I'm going to move the deferral. Councillor Mason, seconded. Councillor Cadwell, thank you. Progress, but not quite an ending. Well, I think the meeting is finished, and we understand our next steps will be receiving the further information we've requested. We'll reconvene as a... Sorry? Oh, sorry, my apologies. We need to vote on the deferral. Yeah, sorry. So those in favour of the deferral? Agreed. So we'll receive that further information and then come back, convene, and we'll actually probably seek further clarification from the planning officers to make the final recommendation, what that may be, with the further information that we've requested. Apologies for this process, but this is, I guess, the position we find ourselves in. All right, there's nothing further. Thank you all for your attendance, and thank you to the committee and to the officers and those that have attended. Thank you.
Well,